Hi there, Chris, Chap in the Cap, Motolegends. Today I want to talk to you about what you can do to stay dry when you're riding the bike. When it comes to staying dry on a bike, the first point that I think I would make is that if you're going to ride a motorbike, at some point you are going to get wet. I often make a joke about if you want to stay dry, drive a car. Well, I think that's funny. But anyway, the inconvenient truth is that nobody can guarantee that if when you ride a motorbike that you are going to stay dry. Supposedly leaking garments are the largest single cause of warranty claims across the motorcycle industry. So what happens? Somebody goes out for a ride on their bike, it's raining, they take their jacket off, there's wet has got in somewhere, so they've got a wet shirt underneath or they've got wet on their underpants, and they assume that there's a problem with the garment itself. Garments come back to people like us, we go and test them, and what we find is that in less than 25% of cases is there actually a problem with the garment. In other words, the membrane, which is the only thing that's being guaranteed, the membrane is doing its job. And that therefore what is happening is water is coming into the garment in some other way. Now, you also need to understand that no manufacturer, however much you spend, not even Rucker, is ever going to guarantee that you're not going to get wet wearing one of their garments. And that's partly because obviously any motorcycle garment, be it a jacket or a pant, they've got large holes in. So you've got a hole for the neck, water can come around the helmet down into the neck, you've got water can come up the sleeves, it can come in at the waist, it can come up the legs and so on. So no one is going to guarantee that you will stay dry wearing their gear. Most manufacturers do offer some kind of limited warranty on their merchandise, and that will include the membrane, so be it a 1 year, a 2 year or 5 year warranty. But that still doesn't mean that you're going to stay dry, because what you have to also factor in is wear and tear. So if you've had an accident and it's touched the membrane or worn through the membrane, obviously you're not going to stay dry if you just wear it out through excessive use. So if you've had a Rucker jacket, you've done 25,000 miles a year for 4 years, you've worn through the membrane, the 6-year warranty doesn't apply anymore. That's just wear and tear. Nor can you, as some people expect they can, rely on what are known as waterproof zips, because actually when you delve down deeper into it, and we obviously have done, waterproof zips are not waterproof. They are at best water resistant. So as far as I'm concerned, there's only ever been one totally waterproof zip. It was a Gore zip, it was a monster zip, it was very uncomfortable, it gave the jacket a life of its own because it was so stiff and so on. That was a waterproof zip. But other than that, no zip on the market is guaranteed to be totally waterproof. I want to finish this little section by talking about Gore's guarantee to keep you dry guarantee. And I want to raise it because even that is a little bit misleading. People think that because they buy a product with a Gore membrane in, they are guaranteed to stay dry. And that's actually not what that guarantee says at all. What Gore is saying somewhat disingenuously is that provided their membrane is not damaged in any way, it will continue to do its job. Well, that's a little bit naughty, I think, because I could say that, or one could say that about any membrane. If you take any membrane and it's not damaged in any way, in 5 years' time it'll be doing its job, in 10 years' time it'll be doing its job, in 20 years' time it will be doing its job. So the Gore guarantee to keep you dry guarantee, I think, is a little bit meaningless. And what it tells us is not necessarily that Gore has a better membrane, it tells us rather that Gore does much better marketing. If we're talking about waterproofing a motorcycle gear and what the limits are, I think we first need to understand what a membrane is, how a membrane works. So that's what I'm going to talk about here for a few seconds. Put simplistically, a membrane is like a very thin polythene sheet with millions of holes in it. That sheet sits on the inside of the outer shell of a motorcycle garment. If that membrane is sewn into the motorcycle garment, into the shoulders, into the seams and so on, and hangs down inside the garment loosely, that is what we know as a drop liner membrane. If that membrane is bonded or heat sealed to the inner surface of the outer fabric, that is what is called a laminated membrane. And I will come back and I'm going to talk about the difference between drop liner and laminated membranes. at a later point. The holes in the membrane are so tiny that the rain droplets from the external rain droplets can't pass through the membrane and reach the body. So we keep dry because the rain can't pass through. But they are large enough to allow sweat to escape, because what happens is sweat leaves the body, it turns into a vapor, it needs to wick away from the body, and the membrane allows that to happen. And that's absolutely crucial. This is basically what a membrane does, because if the sweat can't escape from the body, we're just going to get wet from the inside, and getting wet from the inside is just the same. It's just as unpleasant as getting wet from the outside. Not all membranes, it has to be said, are the same. Some are better than others, but the essential trade-off is between breathability on one hand and impermeability on the other. So some breathe better and some are more water resistant. Nonetheless, it still has to be acknowledged that every membrane will have its limits. There is no membrane that is totally impervious. We measure the strength or the effectiveness of a membrane in terms of water resistance by placing it underneath a cylinder of water, and the height of the water, the height of the column of water in that cylinder is a measure of how strong that membrane is. But there will come a point at which any membrane gives way. Not even the best Gore-Tex membrane is totally impervious to water ingress. Only a plastic sheet, a totally plastic sheet with no holes in, would be totally waterproof in a garment. But that's not a solution, because what that would do, because your sweat couldn't escape, you would in essence be unleashing a monsoon inside the jacket, and again, that's just not very pleasant. Some motorcycle garments have what we term a waterproof treatment or waterproof coating. And those garments don't in truth even pretend to be properly waterproof. They are at best water resistant. They're going to give you protection from the rain for half an hour, hour at most, depending on the heaviness of the rain, obviously. Any garment with a membrane in is going to technically keep the rain off, but not all, as we've seen, are going to perform to the same level. Some are better than others. Some membranes are better than others. But there's another important element to the membrane, and that is where it's sewn in to the garment or bonded into the garment, it has to be taped, and that is an expensive operation. It takes a lot of time. It has to be done very carefully, and you simply won't get the best quality taping, the attention to detail you need to keep the water out if you buy a particularly cheap jacket. I don't particularly like the aphorism, you get what you pay for, but there's some truth to that in this context. A more expensive jacket is likely to be more waterproof because it will simply be better put together. So if you want to stay dry on your motorcycle, just don't go too cheap. Let's talk briefly now. I want to finish with, I'm going to come back to that point I made earlier on about the difference between drop liner and laminated garments. Laminated is where the membrane is bonded, and drop liner is where the membrane hangs down. There's a view out there that laminated garments are more waterproof than drop liner garments, and that's technically not the case. It's a bit of an oversimplification. The membranes that might be used in a garment, a drop liner or a laminated garment, are in essence the same membrane. But where the membrane is laminated, if you're riding for 4 or 5 hours in the rain, that jacket will take on less water. In both a drop liner and a laminated garment, in that kind of time frame, you will stay dry. But the drop liner garment, you may feel wetter because there's lots of water in the garment. You will not be wet, but you will feel wetter. You might get a little bit colder. Nevertheless, and this isn't the time, we've done other videos about laminated garments. I can't go into it in too much depth here, but nevertheless, it's true to say that if you find yourself riding in lots of rain frequently, if you're out on the bike for 3, 4, 5 hours at a time in the rain, then you might be better off with a laminated garment. If you ride in less rain, you'll be better off probably in a drop liner garment because they're more comfortable, they're less expensive, and they're warmer. What I want to do now, I want to talk about some of the things that you can do as a rider to mitigate against water ingress. I think the first thing is to wear the correct base layers. You need to be wearing something that's either synthetic or merino, because you want to be wearing base layers, mid layers that effectively allow moisture to wick away from the body. If you wear anything in cotton, that's a no-no, in that cotton absorbs moisture. If you played football in a cotton t-shirt or worn a shirt like this, you'll know you get wet patches. And what that's saying is the material is absorbing the moisture, it's not wicking it away from the body. So when you arrive at your destination, that can make you feel as though water's entered the garment. In fact, it hasn't. You've just got wet again from the inside. One of the key areas of water ingress into any motorcycle garment, into particularly the jacket, is the neck hole. And what happens is you're riding along in the rain, your helmet, the rain is hitting the helmet, it's running down the helmet and it's running into the neck. The problem is that once a channel has been created for water, once water has found its way through, then all the water finds its way down through that channel. So you arrive somewhere, you take the jacket off, you're wet all over and you think the jacket has leaked, and often it hasn't. The solution is very simple. It's a neoprene neck scarf, it's a waterproof neck scarf or of some sort. You just want to stop water getting in from the helmet into the neck. The problem is that when water enters the jacket in this way, and it's created this channel, it can often enter the pants as well, because it's got a channel, it's running all the way down, it's running vertically down, it's going to end up in the trousers at some point. And what, again, people do is assume that not only do they have a leaking jacket because they're wet inside the jacket, but they're wet in the pants, both halves are leaking. And usually that's not the case. And when somebody comes to us and returns a suit and says to us, both the jacket and the pants are leaking, we know pretty much something's wrong. That's very rarely the case. The chances of a jacket and a pant leaking at the same time, that's very rare. So it's important that we plug this hole, because then water can't run into either the jacket or the pants. The other thing is that water can get under the hem of a jacket as you're riding along. It's more likely to happen on an adventure bike, on a sit-up bike, than it would have been the case with a sports bike. But you're riding along 70 miles an hour, heavy rain, it's hitting the tank of the bike, it's hitting the road, it's bouncing up, it's going to come under your jacket, it'll wick its way up the jacket, you'll take the jacket off, you'll feel wet. Now, there's nothing you can do to prevent that if you do not zip together. So really, the solution here is to have a suit that zips together. What you want really, ideally, is a suit that zips together with an almost 360-degree zip, one that comes all the way around here. There's always going to be a slight gap for the main zip, but you want what we call a 360-degree zip. In some outfits, particularly adventure outfits, you will often get a short zip at the back, and that's fine. Works well if you have an accident, because it's going to stop the jacket and the pant pulling apart, leaving your back exposed. But in terms of preventing water ingress, the short zip isn't going to crack it. If you've just got a short zip, you are leaving yourself vulnerable to water coming up inside a jacket. The other thing you need to do is to make sure that the zips on your garment are fully closed, because the zips are a weak point for water ingress on any garment, on any jacket, on any pants. It's particularly the case with a laminated garment. Now, just going back, a laminated garment is one where the membrane is bonded to the inside of the fabric. So what that means is that when you have a zip in a laminated garment, there's no membrane, the water's going to pass straight through to the body. So with a laminated garment, it's absolutely vital that you have the zips closed. It's also, it's got to be said, an issue with a drop liner garment, but slightly different on a drop liner garment in that you've got the membrane on the inside. If you have a zip open, then the water still has to get through the membrane. But whether it's a drop liner garment or a laminated garment, make sure the zips are firmly closed, because that will always be a weak point. Another thing that you can do to make sure that your motorcycle gear is as waterproof as it can be, it's going to prevent water ingress as much as it can do, is to wash it regularly. Because if you don't wash your waterproof clothing fairly frequently, there will come a point where it stops working. What happens is that over time, as you're riding along, the clothing, both your jacket and your pants, are going to accumulate, take on board the muck, the mud, the dirt and the grime that bounces up from the road. And that seeps into the pores of the fabric. Imagine you are in the winter driving along in your car, you've got no water left in the reservoir, all that mud that comes off the road that stops you seeing out of the windscreen, that's happening on a bike every time you go out. There's no such thing as a windscreen wiper on a bike jacket, so that just gets sucked in. That dries out. And the problem is that when it rains, that sucks the water into the garment, and that is going to speed up the point at which the membrane becomes overwhelmed, because jackets rely on a certain barrier to stop water getting in, reaching the membrane. But if you've got a dirty jacket that is attracting water into the jacket, it's just going to make the jacket less waterproof. The other thing that you should be aware of when you're washing your garment is that you need to refresh what we call the DWR. That stands for durable water repellent, and it's a coating, and every motorcycle garment has or every waterproof motorcycle garment has a DWR, because that's the first barrier against water ingress. So you don't want to overwhelm the membrane, so you have this coating all over the jacket that stops water getting in. Eventually in heavy rain, water will pass through the DWR, but you want to slow down the speed with which water enters the jacket and needs to be kept away from the body by the membrane. That DWR wears out over time. So when you wash your garment, you need to refresh the DWR, and that's fine. It's pretty straightforward. Most of the cleaning products you buy when you're cleaning your jacket, or that you want to buy when you're cleaning your jacket, will come with a refresher. There's a point here that I had forgotten that is important. When you clean your motorcycle jacket, wash your motorcycle jacket, you must not use a detergent, because I was talking earlier on about the tape, the importance of the tape. If you use a detergent, a strong detergent, particularly biological detergent, but even a non-bio, that can undo the tape, it can unstick the glue, and then suddenly your jacket isn't waterproof. So when you wash your gear, you need a proper wash, a non-detergent wash. Nick Quacks do one, we like this one particularly, it's from a company called Storm, but what will happen is, that's the wash, this is a solution that reproofs the jacket to give you a refreshed, renewed DWR. Another thing, most people, having spent what they would reckon is good money, as much as they could afford maybe, on a waterproof garment, on a waterproof jacket, on a waterproof pant, don't want to be bothered with wearing a waterproof on the outside. They feel, and I can understand this, they feel as though they shouldn't have to, and that is kind of the case. Waterproofs over the top of a garment, it's got to be said, are also a bit of a pain. You've got to stop and put them on. But if you want to stay bone dry on any particular journey, then wearing a waterproof over the top of a waterproof garment takes you closer to that 100% situation, to that nirvana where we are completely protected against water ingress. I'm not suggesting that you need to do this on a short journey. If you're out for an hour's commute, or a couple of hours in the rain, then you just shouldn't need a waterproof over the top. But I think if you find yourself in extreme situations, let's say you're going from here in Guildford up to Scotland, you know it's going to rain all the way. If you put a waterproof on over the top of your motorcycle jacket, and I'm talking about something like this from Scott's, so there's a jacket and a pant. If you put something like that over the top of your motorcycle gear, you will stay much drier, because that will soak up, or that will repel 90% of the rain. You'll arrive, the jacket underneath will be bone dry. So that's the way to go in extreme circumstances, because I'm working on the basis that, or we are working on the basis that, two membranes are better than one. In this review, it was never my intention to go into great depth about boots and gloves, but we'll cover that in another review. For now, however, there were just a few words that I wanted to say. We've discussed laminated versus drop liner in the context of jackets and pants. It applies equally to gloves. Your hands are going to stay dry in a laminated glove. Your hands are out there at the front of the bike. They're taking a bit of a beating. It's important that your hands stay dry. So a laminated glove is always going to work a little bit better than a drop liner glove. You should also bear in mind that a textile glove is going to work better in terms of preventing water ingress than a leather glove. Now, all gloves, nearly all gloves, will have a leather palm, and you then either have a leather back or a textile back. A glove with a textile back is going to resist water ingress to a greater degree. So the best kind of glove is going to be a laminated glove with a textile back. The other thing that you need to bear in mind is that you should, to prevent water getting into the hand, you want a glove with a certain length of cuff. And I'm talking about a glove with a cuff like this. And that's important, because what you want to do, that cuff needs to go inside the sleeve of the jacket. So any decent waterproof jacket should have a zip and a Velcro strap. You undo those, you put the cuff of the glove inside the sleeve, you then do the zip, then you tighten the Velcro strap to cinch it up. That way, water is never going to be able to run down the sleeve into the glove, or come in and get around it into the glove. Some people, however, will want to wear, and of course I understand why they would want to wear a thick winter glove, because they're commuting perhaps through the winter. The problem with winter gloves is they've often got a cuff that is so thick that it won't go inside the jacket. I'm afraid there's no way around this. If that's the glove you've got, if it won't go inside, which is where it should go, you're going to have to wear it on the outside. There may be some water trickles into the gloves, but that goes with it. Nothing really we can do about that. Feet, keeping your feet dry. You should go for a taller boot. If keeping your feet dry is the issue, go for a taller boot. The problem with a short boot is that rain's going to hit the floor, it's going to bounce off the floor, it's going to come over the shaft of the boot. The other thing is that as we're riding along in heavy rain, the bottom 2 or 3 inches of our trousers, whatever trousers we're wearing, will get wet. If you've got a short boot, that dampness or the wet that's held by the trousers will again leak into the shaft or will drip down into the shaft. You'll end up with wet feet. The other consideration is, and I'm talking now about if you've got a proper tall boot, we need trousers that are long enough. We are not choosing our motorcycle trousers, especially if we're talking about the context of keeping dry, we're not choosing our motorcycle trousers to look great on the street. What they've got to do is work on the bike. And on the bike, the bottom of the trouser, the hem of the trouser should sit on the middle of the ankle bone. The problem with that is that when you're sat on the bike, you lift your leg, the trouser rises, so you get it to the right point on the bike. When you get off the bike, the trouser's going to fall and the trouser's going to appear too long on the street, and that bothers some people, but it shouldn't do. It's just the way it is. If they are too short, if your trousers are too short, what's going to happen is water's going to get underneath the trousers and into the boot, even with a tall boot. And what you have to bear in mind is if you're riding, for example, a big adventure bike, something like a GS, your trouser can raise as you sit on the bike and as you lift your leg, your trouser can raise by 3, 4, even more inches. So it's important that when you buy a motorcycle trouser, you sit on the bike and you get the length in the right place. And the length, as I've said, is about the middle of the ankle bone. If it's halfway up your calf, then I'm afraid you're going to get water. It's going to come up inside the trouser, it's going to get in the boot. You're going to think that something's going wrong. You're going to think that the trousers are leaking, that boots are leaking. It's not. It's just you've got a trouser that is too short. If you are more bothered, however, about having a motorcycle trouser that's going to make you look fantastic when you go and buy a bacon sandwich, that's fine by us. You're just going to get wet feet. Obviously, nobody wants to get wet. Okay, fish want to get wet, but most of us don't. But the real issue about getting wet is the impact it has on our ability to stay warm. And staying warm is vital when it comes to riding a bike safely and being able to concentrate on all the things that are going to help us stay alive. So nice as it is to be dry on the bike, the more important thing is staying warm on the bike. And the two are inextricably linked because we lose heat from our body far faster through a wet medium than we do through a dry medium. On Klim's website, there's a statistic that says that body heat is lost 23 times faster through a wet medium than a dry one. Now, I don't know whether that's a correct stat or not, but clearly the direction of travel is correct. We become colder faster when there's moisture, when there's wet inside our jackets than we do when we're dry. So, in our view, arriving at a destination feeling a touch wet, well, that's a little bit inconvenient. But riding when you're cold, when you can't feel your body parts, when your fingers have gone numb, when the only thing you can think about is how bloody cold you are, that is dangerous, even irresponsible. And that is why, ultimately, that is why it's so important to stay dry on the bike. Think those who ride in colder climates than ours, who ride up in Scandinavia, are particularly attuned to this phenomenon because they know that if their body gets wet because moisture has got in, water has got in, or they're wearing the wrong base layers, if they get moisture inside their garments, when the temperature falls further, let's say they are riding into the night, that moisture can freeze, hypothermia is not far away, and that can be a killer. So ultimately, in our view, staying dry is about staying warm. When you ride a motorbike, you are exposed to the elements in a way that you rarely are in other aspects of life. You can be doing 70 miles an hour into a howling gale, rain is bucketing down. And in conditions like those, on a bike, it's only a matter of time before rain is going to find its way through to the body. There is a kind of biker out there, and sometimes it's people who've not been biking for long or they've come to biking later in life, whose first thought when they get wet is that their gear has let them down. And I think that's a tad naive. And the truth is that if you cannot stand the notion of it ever getting wet, very simply, you should not ride a motorbike. When you climb a mountain, you have to accept that or when you take up mountain climbing, you have to accept that you are going to get cold, and you don't send your jacket back to the shop just because you got cold. If you ride a bike, you will occasionally get wet. Sometimes you're going to get very wet, and you're probably going to get cold too. Now, there are some things you can do to mitigate for the issues, to minimize the problems. You can perhaps look at buying better gear. You can get things like a fairing on the bike. You could take on board some of the hints and tips that we've been discussing today. But there will be times, nonetheless, where you get soaked through to the skin. And as motorcyclists, we have all been there. It's kind of like a biker's rites of passage. You won't necessarily enjoy the experience, but you can embrace it. You can try to understand it so that the next time you find yourself in that situation, you might be better prepared for it. But ultimately, it is nobody's fault. And like the poor workman who always blames his tools, it is not necessarily right to blame the gear when, for whatever reasons, you get wet. It could be something as simple as the way you're wearing it. Getting wet is part of biking. It goes with the territory, and we have to accept that as part of the experience. There are, of course, more comfortable ways of traveling, from getting from A to B, but you're a biker, and at times as a biker, I'm afraid you've just got to suck it up. I hope you found some of that interesting, informative, useful. If you want to look at some of the waterproof gear that we sell, visit the website motolegends.com. Once you're on the site, any item you come across, you can check the spec out in a little bit more detail, and you can check availability, and obviously you can buy gear there and then. Now, when you do buy from us, we try to make the process simple, straightforward and risk-free as we possibly can. There's no delivery charge on any item or protected wear that you buy from us. Returns are totally free, and what's more, we give you a full 12 months in which to decide whether you do want to return something to us. We have the best price promise in the motorcycle business. John Lewis is rightly famed for its never snowingly undersold price promise. We go one better. If you find anyone selling anything that we sell at a price that is lower than ours, we will beat that competitor's price by a full 10%. Now, there are a few terms and conditions associated with what we call our price beat, nothing particularly onerous, but if you are going to price beat us, I suggest you go over to the website and check out what those terms and conditions are. If in the future you'd like to receive bulletins from us about new products, then if you go to the website, at the top of every page there's a piece of script that says newsletter sign up. Click on there, within seconds you'll be in business. You'll receive our bulletins in the future. If, however, you prefer to get your information videographically, that is to say in this form, we'd be simply delighted if you wanted to become a subscriber to our YouTube channel, and you can do that by clicking on the button below. Now, this is 2021. Last year, 2020, we gave away to one of our YouTube subscribers a 125cc Mutt motorcycle that we had customized to look a little bit like a Steve McQueen bike. This year we are giving away a 250cc Fantic Caballero Scrambler. We're giving it away, actually, we're recording this in early December, we're giving it away just before Christmas. We're giving it away this year not to a YouTube subscriber, but to somebody who follows us on Facebook. So if you want to stand a chance of winning this fabulous little bike, I'd get on the case now, because we're going to be giving it away very, very soon. Finally, I'd like to make a play for our little shop here at Motolegends. We're based about a mile from the centre of Guildford, a mile from the railway station. And as I suggest, the shop is fairly small. It's got a small footprint, but it's attached to our warehouse where we have more than £2 million worth of stock arranged over 3 floors. Technically, that makes us the second largest motorcycle apparel shop in the UK. But we think we are far more than just the amount of merchandise we have in the building. We're all about service. We're all about personal fitting. If you want to check us out, visit Trustpilot. We have the highest 5-star ranking in the business. When you come see us, we'll only serve you the finest Italian illy coffee, or we'll serve you proper Yorkshire tea in a proper teapot. And who knows, if you're lucky, you might even get to sample one of our delicious motorcycle-shaped shortbread biscuits. Anyway, this has been Chris. I hope to talk to you again soon.